for the question, Psycho. I mean, there are lots of things you can do that don't cost very much money or any money at all. I think that's the places you should start. You're probably doing some of them already, but you have 75 volunteers, that's quite a lot. But recognising each of their birthdays is something you can do, which is quite nice for people. If you do start doing it, try not to miss anyone out, though, because people do get a bit upset when they feel like you forgot them. Buying 75 birthday cards in a year does incur a cost, but some of them might receive an e-card through email, maybe they're often free, just as a starter. Who else would like to input? Sheila?
This is a challenge for all of us, but I think that you should ask your volunteers what they would want as well. We have volunteers-only meetings. They did themselves decide recently that they wanted more social events. We said, great. So we have one of our volunteers who is organizing other volunteers to meet up for social events. One of the things that we did recently is, that they did rather, was they went to the National Portrait Gallery and we said, okay, we'll pay for your travel and a cup of coffee. So the National Portrait Gallery entrance is free. That was their idea. They were excited to do it. Great. And also this coming Wednesday, they're going to visit one of our member organizations, which is the Kenchestown City Farm. And afterwards, they're going out for lunch. You could do other things like maybe, I don't know what we call it here, but we call it potluck dinners and that sort of thing, where people bring food. And that doesn't cost very much money. You could even reimburse, I'm assuming reimburse their lunch expenses at the moment?
No, we don't.
Okay. You might want to think about trying to apply for some funding to see if you could get some funding to reimburse. Do you reimburse any expenses at all whatsoever?
We're just about got enough money for the expenses.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully Jack or one of us will be able to point you in the right direction. Perhaps it's Voluntary Action Camden, I'm sitting here in Camden, would be able to locate some funding for you to access, because that is important to reduce the barriers to people getting into volunteering, because people shouldn't be out of pocket through their volunteering, for example. But I also think that you need to find out what are people's motivations for volunteering. Because I think you said that people are coming in and then you're finding stuff for them to do.
So what it is, because we're funded by the big lottery, my job description has changed quite a lot, because one of the outcomes is that we need to try and get them into employment, which we're doing. So basically they are leaving, but then Homestart, the crux of the organisation, is about volunteers. So if they keep leaving, we need to keep finding more. So whereas a year ago that wasn't the case, because obviously we were funded by Camden Council, but obviously money's tight.
So in a way, that already gives you their motivation for volunteering potentially to get into paid employment. So you could think about when are you going to provide a reference for them after so many months of volunteering? What sorts of training might you need to provide that they would be interested in? Are you doing things like writing CVs, interviewing skills, and that sort of thing? Potentially they could even help you deliver training for new volunteers. They could help you manage other volunteers. Think about the roles that they want to get into for paid employment. What sorts of things could they do at your organization? What sort of roles could you create that they could use as maybe transferable skills and things like that? Possibly.
One quick idea is if you've got people that are looking for employment in the sort of entertainment industry or events management industry, maybe see if those volunteers want to organise a fundraising event, which you could then use the funds to contribute to the volunteers' expenses themselves. Well, did you?
Yeah, there are, I think a lot of the stuff I was going to say has already been covered, but there are a few other things you can think about. Individual motivations, as Sheila mentioned, it is actually really important in terms of volunteer retention. Again, kind of slightly broadening the point out to a more general issue around retention. Because individual motivations for volunteering is really important. Now, even in your situation where it may look like the motivation will be to find work, there are going to be other motivations alongside that. But in general, people have their own individual things which make them think, well, okay, I want to volunteer, or more specifically, I want to volunteer in that role. And knowing what individuals are after can really help, because if someone's volunteering because they just wanted to feel useful again, or use old skills if they're retired or someone, being aware that they're getting that from the volunteer role, maybe adjusting what they're doing somewhat to fit that can help, or people who may feel that they just want to meet people. So emphasising that side of a particular role, again, can be really useful with that. But also being aware if at a later point, after someone's been recruited, well, are those motivations being met, or have those motivations changed? Because you could have started the role, you could have started volunteering because you thought, well, I've been told it would be useful for me to find a job. But the stuff that keeps you coming back could be a particular aspect, like working with service users that you hadn't anticipated before. So being aware of changing motivations, and again, maybe being able to change your role slightly to meet new motivations can help a lot. Just other ideas around motivation, again without, well actually one problem that did occur was is that with, again, general point, any time when you're applying for funding for something which will involve volunteers, do make sure you are putting in a full cost recovery in the sense of the cost of involving volunteers, to be able to reimburse travel and food expenses, and to be able to facilitate other things such as the Volunteers Week celebration or a Christmas lunch and that kind of thing, which again can help, and some people do like those events. But on top of that, there are very small things which again can help and don't have the big cost. Making sure that volunteers are kept informed about what's going on, so they feel part of the organisation, involved in its work, can see how their work is helping, that they're actually making a difference. Because I think a lot of people want that from their volunteering, to know that the fact they're giving up their time is actually making a difference. So being able to see outcomes, being aware of what's going on within the organisation, so they're engaged in discussions or in news, so again they feel at home and part of something broader. Recognising volunteers' work could be in things like annual reports, could be in newsletters, finding stories for local press, getting a story in the local papers, really that sets out what volunteers have done, and maybe getting a few volunteers' pictures in there. People absolutely adore that, but also it's really good for getting new volunteers in. Whenever the chief exec does public announcements or speaks in meetings, always mention volunteers so they don't feel left out. So it's the little things, as much as the bigger events and so on, which will make the difference, I think.